I still remember the exact moment I realized humans were insane, not dangerous, not aggressive, just completely, utterly, magnificently out of their minds. My name is Vorath, and I'm what you might call a sports analyst for the Galactic Combat Federation. 23 years I've been doing this job, covering fights across 17 different planetary systems. I've seen Craxian warriors tear steel beams apart with their mandibles. I've watched Thorvian berserkers fight for 6 straight hours without breaking a sweat. I've even seen a Gelithian monk achieve perfect meditation while being pummeled by 4 opponents simultaneously. But nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened on Station Omega-7 that day. The whole thing started because of a bet. Isn't that how all the best disasters begin? My colleague Threx, a pompous Volturian with too much money and not enough sense, had been going on for weeks about how humans were nothing special, just another species trying to make a name for themselves in the galactic arena. Soft, weak, slow. Their bone density is pathetic, he'd say, clicking his mandibles in that annoying way Volturians do when they think they're being clever. Their muscle fiber composition is barely adequate. They lack natural armor, venom sacs, enhanced reflexes, or any of the standard combat adaptations we see in serious species. I'd heard it all before. Every analyst in the Federation had an opinion about Earth's newest arrivals. Most of those opinions weren't flattering, but then came the announcement that changed everything. A human fighter, some nobody from Earth, had challenged Kraz the Unyielding to a match. Kraz, for those who don't follow combat sports, was the reigning champion of the middleweight division. A Bronthar warrior with fists like sledgehammers and a winning streak that had lasted 7 years. He'd put 19 opponents in the medical bay. 3 had never fought again, and now some human girl wanted a piece of him. Her name was Maya Torres, 22 standard years old. 5 feet and 6 inches tall, which converted to roughly 1.67 meters for those of us who actually use sensible measurements. She weighed in at 35 pounds. Her record showed 12 amateur fights back on Earth, 10 wins, 2 losses. Nothing impressive by galactic standards. The betting odds were absurd. 500 to 1 against her lasting more than 90 seconds. 1,000 to 1 against her landing a single meaningful strike. The bookmakers wouldn't even take bets on her actually winning. Threx saw opportunity. "I'll wager you a full month's salary," he said to me over drinks the night before the fight. "The human doesn't make it past the first round. Probably gets knocked out in under a minute." I should have taken that bet. But I was cautious, and caution doesn't pay well in our business. The arena on Station Omega-7 was packed, 15,000 beings from across the galaxy, all cramming into the stadium to watch what everyone assumed would be a quick, brutal, and probably educational beatdown. A lesson for humanity about knowing their place in the galactic hierarchy. I had a ringside seat, data pad in hand, ready to record another routine victory for Kraz. The atmosphere was electric, but not because anyone expected a real fight. People wanted to see the spectacle, the mismatch, the inevitable conclusion. The Bronthar entered first. Kraz the Unyielding stood 8 feet tall, his crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights. Bronthars are silicon-based lifeforms, basically living rock formations with attitude problems. When Kraz moved, you could hear the grinding sound of stone against stone. His fists were literally chunks of reinforced mineral that could shatter concrete. He raised those fists to the crowd, and they roared their approval. Then came Maya. The contrast was almost comical. She walked into that arena wearing simple black shorts and a gray tank top. No armor, no enhancements, no cybernetic implants or genetic modifications that I could detect. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight braid. Her brown eyes scanned the crowd with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it nervousness, determination, focus? I noticed something odd. While Kraz was playing to the audience, flexing and posturing and generally being the showman everyone expected, Maya was stretching. Just simple, basic stretches, rotating her shoulders, rolling her neck, shaking out her hand, like she was getting ready for a light workout instead of a fight against a living mountain. The referee, a neutral Quarian with 4 arms and an impressive mustache, called both fighters to the center. He went through the standard rules: no weapons, no lethal techniques. Fight continues until knockout, submission, or the doctor stops it. Standard stuff. Kraz barely listened. He was too busy staring down at Maya, his crystalline features arranged in what passed for a contemptuous sneer among his species. "You sure you want to do this, little mammal?" His voice sounded like boulders grinding together. "I've crushed tougher things than you just by sitting down." Maya looked up at him. and smiled, not a nervous smile, not a fake confidence smile. A genuine, almost amused smile. "We'll see," she said. The crowd laughed. Even I chuckled. The audacity was impressive, even if it was completely unfounded. They returned to their corners. I checked my datapad, making sure the recording feeds were working properly. This would be quick, but the footage would be useful for analysis. Maybe we could learn something about human physiology from watching how they break under pressure. The bell rang. Kraz moved forward immediately, his massive form charging across the ring with surprising speed for something made of stone. The crowd's noise level doubled. This was it. The moment everyone came to see. Maya didn't retreat. She didn't panic. She simply shifted her weight, moving laterally to her left, her feet gliding across the canvas in a smooth pattern that looked almost like dancing. Kraz threw a punch, a massive, overhand right that would have caved in the skull of most organic beings. The wind displacement alone was audible even over the crowd noise. Maya wasn't there. She'd moved. Just a slight duck and a sidestep, minimal effort, maximum efficiency. The punch sailed past where her head had been a fraction of a second earlier. Kraz grunted, surprised. He threw another punch. A left hook this time, trying to catch her as she dodged. Same result. The crowd's noise shifted slightly, confusion mixing with the excitement. For the next 30 seconds, this pattern continued. Kraz would throw these massive, devastating strikes, each one powerful enough to end the fight instantly if it connected. And each time, Maya would simply not be where the punch was going. She made it look effortless. "She's quick," Threx muttered from his seat next to me. "But she can't keep that up forever. One mistake and it's over." He wasn't wrong. Maya was burning energy with all that movement, and she hadn't thrown a single punch herself. She was just dodging, ducking, weaving, staying out of range. Then something changed. After about 45 seconds, Kraz started getting frustrated. You could see it in the way he was moving, getting sloppier, throwing harder but wilder. He'd expected to land something by now. Expected the human to be paced on the canvas. Instead, she was making him look slow, and that's when Maya started her counterattack. She threw a jab. A simple, basic, textbook jab. Her left hand flicked out, traveling maybe 12 inches, and tapped Kraz right on what passed for his jaw. The crowd laughed. Kraz definitely laughed. That deep rumbling sound of stone grinding against stone. "Is that the best you can do?" he bellowed. "I've been hit harder by orbital debris." More laughter. Even the referee looked amused. Maya didn't react. She just threw another jab. Same target. Same speed. Another gentle tap against Kraz's crystalline head. This time Kraz didn't even bother acknowledging it. He threw a wild haymaker, trying to decapitate her. She ducked under it easily and threw another jab. Tap. "She's not even trying," someone behind me said. "This is embarrassing," but I noticed something. I zoomed in with my datapad's camera, focusing on the point of contact. Maya's punches weren't random. Every single jab was hitting the exact same spot. A small area just below Kraz's right optical sensor. Again and again. Tap. The crowd was getting bored. This wasn't the exciting massacre they'd paid to see. Kraz was getting angrier. Maya was just tapping him with these slow, weak-looking punches that couldn't possibly do any damage. Round 1 ended. Maya returned to her corner. She wasn't even breathing hard. Kraz looked frustrated but confident. The first round was a feeling-out process anyway. He'd connect in the second round. Everyone knew it. Round 2 began. The pattern continued. Kraz throwing massive bombs. Maya dodging and weaving. But now, between every dodge, she'd throw one of those jabs. Always the same spot. Always the same technique. Tap. Tap. "What is she doing?" Threx asked. "Those punches aren't even leaving marks." He was right. Kraz's crystalline exterior showed no visible damage. No cracks. No chips. Nothing. But I noticed something else. Kraz was slowing down. Just slightly. His punches were still powerful. Still dangerous. But the speed was decreasing. And his movements were becoming more predictable. Maya noticed too. I could see it in how she adjusted her footwork, taking slightly smaller steps, conserving energy. Midway through the second round, Kraz landed his first real punch. A body shot that caught Maya as she moved. The impact was audible throughout the arena. A sound like a sledgehammer hitting a side of beef. Maya grunted, stumbled back, clutched her ribs. The crowd erupted. Finally, contact. Kraz pressed forward, sensing victory. He threw a combination, trying to finish it. But Maya recovered faster than anyone expected. She slipped the first follow-up punch, blocked the second with her forearm despite the obvious pain it caused, and created distance again, and then she went back to jabbing. Tap, tap, same spot. Over and over. That precise point below his optical sensor. I pulled up structural data on Bronthar anatomy on my datapad. Their exoskeletons were incredibly strong but not uniform in density. There were stress points, weak points, places where the crystalline matrix was thinner or where multiple plates connected. Was she targeting one of those points? With jabs? Jabs that looked like they couldn't crack an egg. The second round ended. Maya returned to her corner, favoring her left side where she'd been hit. But her expression hadn't changed. Still focused, still calm. Kraz was breathing harder now. Or whatever passes for breathing among silicon-based lifeforms. His corner was animated, gesturing wildly. Third round, Threx said. He finishes it this round. Mark my words. The bell rang for round 3. Kraz came out aggressive, trying to end it quickly. But he was noticeably slower now. Those massive punches that had seemed so fast in round 1 were now telegraphed. Read. Maya's dodges required less effort, and those jabs, they came more frequently now. Tap, 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 tap. Same spot. Always the same exact spot. The crowd was getting restless. This wasn't entertaining anymore. It was just weird. A human girl playing tag with a Bronthar warrior, neither one doing any visible damage to the other. Then, at the 2-minute mark of round 3, something happened. Maya threw one of her jabs. Same technique. Same target, but this time, there was a sound, a small sound. Easy to miss under the noise of the crowd, but my audio recording equipment caught it. Crack! Kraz froze. His expression shifted. For the first time in the fight, I saw something in his features that looked like concern. Maya didn't hesitate. She threw another jab. Crack. Louder this time. Much louder. The crowd noise died down. People were leaning forward now trying to figure out what was happening. Kraz raised his hands defensively, but his movements were slow. Sluggish. Maya set her feet, rotated her hips, and threw a right cross. Not a jab this time. A real punch. Her whole body behind it. Her fist traveling the same path as all those jabs, targeting that same precise spot that she'd been tapping for the last 6 minutes. The impact sounded like a gunshot. Kraz's head snapped back. A visible crack appeared in his crystalline exoskeleton, spreading from the impact point like a spiderweb across glass. Chunks of crystalline material fell away. The Bronthar warrior stumbled. His massive form swayed, and then he fell. 8 feet of living stone crashed to the canvas with a sound that shook the entire arena. The ring literally bounced from the impact. The referee rushed over, checking Kraz's vitals. The crowd sat in absolute silence. 15,000 beings speechless. I checked my datapad sensors. Kraz's cardiac rhythm, or the equivalent for Bronthar's, had become irregular. Not stopped, but struggling. His exoskeleton had a fracture that extended deep into his internal matrix. The referee's 4 arms went up simultaneously, signaling the end of the fight. Technical knockout. Winner, Maya Torres. The silence lasted maybe 3 more seconds. Then the arena exploded. Not with cheers. With chaos. Confusion. Shock. Threx just sat there, his mandibles hanging open, his datapad forgotten in his lap. I watched Maya. She was bent over slightly, hands on her knees, breathing hard now. That body shot had definitely hurt her. But she was smiling. That same calm, knowing smile she'd had before the fight started. Medical personnel swarmed the ring, working on Kraz. The big Bronthar was conscious but disoriented. They'd need specialized equipment to repair the damage to his exoskeleton. I was already replaying the footage, analyzing frame by frame. Every single one of Maya's jabs had hit the exact same spot within a margin of error of less than 2 millimeters. The accumulative impact had created microfractures in Kraz's exoskeleton. Those microfractures had connected, weakened the structure, and when she finally threw a full power punch, the entire thing had shattered like glass. It wasn't about power. It was about precision, patience, understanding the target's physiology and exploiting its weaknesses through persistent, focused effort. I'd never seen anything like it. The post-fight press conference was bedlam. Reporters from every major news service in the Federation scrambled for answers. How did she do it? What was the technique? Was this a standard human fighting style? Maya sat at the table, an ice pack pressed against her ribs, looking slightly overwhelmed by all the attention. It's called the drip method, she explained, her voice hoarse. Water doesn't cut through stone because it's powerful. It does it through persistence. Finding the weak point and working it until something gives. My coach back on Earth taught me that patience beats power almost every time. Someone asked if she'd been scared facing Kraz. She laughed. Actually laughed. Terrified, she admitted. Did you see the size of that guy? But fear just means you're paying attention. You can't let it stop you from doing what needs to be done. I filed my report that night, but I knew nobody would believe it without the video evidence. A human, one of the galaxy's newest and supposedly weakest species, had defeated a reigning champion through sheer technique and mental fortitude. The betting houses lost billions of credits that day. Threx lost a month's salary to me after I pointed out that technically I'd never refused his bet. He'd just assumed I'd agree. But more importantly, everything changed. Within a week, 3 more human fighters had registered for Federation combat licenses. Within a month, 12 more. They came in all sizes, all backgrounds, all fighting styles. Some won, some lost. But they all had that same quality Maya had shown, that absolute, unshakable determination to keep going no matter how outmatched they appeared. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Humans might not be the strongest species, not the fastest, not the most naturally gifted fighters, but they understood something that many of us had forgotten in our reliance on natural advantages and genetic superiority. Fighting isn't just about what your body can do, it's about what your mind refuses to quit doing. And human minds, it turned out, were spectacularly stubborn things. The aftermath of Maya Torres versus Kraz the Unyielding became what we in the sports analysis business call a watershed moment. That's a fancy way of saying everything went completely sideways, and nobody knew how to deal with it. 3 days after the fight, I was sitting in my apartment on Station Omega 7, reviewing footage for the 100th time, when my communication console started screaming at me. 18 missed calls, 47 messages, all from different news outlets, sports networks, and what appeared to be several research institutions. Everyone wanted the same thing. They wanted to understand what had happened. More importantly, they wanted to know if it could happen again. The answer to that second question came faster than anyone expected. 2 weeks after Maya's victory, the Federation announced a special exhibition event. 5 fights. 5 different human competitors against 5 established champions from various weight classes. The whole thing would be broadcast across 63 planetary systems. Sponsorship deals were in the billions of credits. Threx was practically vibrating with excitement when he cornered me at the analyst briefing. This is it, Vorath. This is our chance to see if the Torres fight was a fluke or if humans actually have something worth paying attention to. I wasn't so sure. Maya's victory had been impressive. Absolutely. But one fight doesn't establish a pattern. Maybe she'd just gotten lucky. Maybe Kraz had been having an off day. Maybe the whole thing was a statistical anomaly that would never repeat itself. The universe, as usual, had other plans. The exhibition was scheduled for Station Meridian 3, a massive commercial hub, with an arena that could seat 40,000 beings. Tickets sold out in under 6 hours. The secondary market was insane. People were paying 10 times face value just to witness what everyone was calling the human evaluation. I secured my press credentials and made the trip 5 days before the event. Wanted to do some background work, interview the human fighters if possible, get a sense of what we were actually dealing with. The humans had set up a training facility in one of the station's cargo bays, repurposed the whole thing into a makeshift gym. When I arrived, security almost didn't let me in. Apparently they'd been dealing with a flood of reporters, scouts, and various beings trying to steal training secrets. But my credentials got me through, and what I found inside was fascinating. There were 8 humans training, 5 who would fight in the exhibition, plus 3 alternates in case of injury. They ranged from a wiry male who couldn't have weighed more than 150 pounds, to a female built like a Thorvian battle tank, who looked like she could bench press a transport shuttle. What struck me immediately was the variety. These weren't cookie-cutter warriors produced by some standardized training program. Each one had their own style, their own approach, their own philosophy. I spotted Maya in one corner working with the smaller male fighter. She was demonstrating something, moving in slow motion, adjusting his stance with gentle pushes and pulls. A human female approached me. She was maybe 30 standard years old, with short red hair and the kind of confident posture that suggested military background. "You're Vorath, right?" The analyst who covered Maya's fight. I confirmed my identity. She extended her hand in that strange human greeting gesture. I'd learned about it in my research. The handshake. A holdover from ancient times supposedly proving you weren't carrying a weapon. Captain Nadia Reeves, she said as I awkwardly attempted the gesture. I'm coordinating the human delegation for the exhibition. Maya mentioned you gave fair coverage of her fight. Didn't try to make excuses or claim it was rigged. I report what I observe, I said. And what I observed was a masterclass in precision striking and tactical patience. She smiled at that. Want to see what else we've got? For the next 3 hours, Captain Reeves walked me through their operation. Each fighter had a specific role, a specific style they were showcasing. It wasn't about proving humans were the strongest or the fastest. It was about demonstrating the breadth of human combat philosophy. There was Marcus Webb, the small male I'd seen training with Maya. His specialty was something called Brazilian grappling, ground fighting, taking opponents down and submitting them through joint locks and chokes. He'd be facing a Veltraxian crusher, a species known for their powerful legs and low center of gravity. Then there was Keiko Tanaka, a female fighter who specialized in explosive power and timing. Her opponent would be a Scythian warrior, reptilian beings with incredible reflexes and venomous spines, dangerous in close quarters. The third fighter was a man named David Okonkwo. He was the largest of the humans, standing 6 feet 4 inches tall with a reach that seemed impossible. His style was something called Dutch kickboxing. Heavy emphasis on knees, elbows and brutal efficiency. He'd fight a Kryn berserker, insectoid creatures with 4 arms and an aggressive fighting style. Fourth was a woman named Lisa Park. She was a counterpuncher, according to Captain Reeves. Someone who excelled at defense and then capitalized on her opponent's mistakes. Her match would be against a Thorvian brawler, exactly the kind of pressure fighter who should, theoretically, overwhelm a defensive specialist. And the final fight, the main event, featured a human male named Jackson Cole. Former military, multiple combat deployments on Earth. Extensive experience in something called mixed martial arts. He'd be facing Rax the Annihilator, a Dracan warlord who'd won 37 consecutive fights and had literally killed 3 opponents in the ring before new safety regulations were implemented. You're sending Cole against Rax? I couldn't keep the shock out of my voice. That's not a fight. That's an execution. Rax outweighs him by at least 200 pounds, and has natural weapons. Claws, fangs, scales that can deflect most strikes. Captain Reeves looked at me with an expression I was learning to recognize. That calm, almost amused confidence that humans seemed to wear when everyone else thought they were insane. Rax has advantages, she admitted. But Jackson has fought in worse conditions against worse odds. And he's got something Rax doesn't have. What's that? A plan. I spent the remaining days before the exhibition interviewing the fighters, reviewing their training footage, and analyzing their potential opponents. The more I learned, the more concerned I became, not because I thought the humans would lose. That was still the most likely outcome in most of the matchups, but because I was starting to understand something that made me deeply uncomfortable. Humans didn't fight like other species. Most galactic species approached combat as a test of natural superiority. Bronthars relied on their stone bodies. Thorvians used their size and strength. Krynan employed their multiple limbs and pack tactics. Everyone had their natural advantage and built their fighting style around it. Humans had no natural advantages, so instead they'd developed something else entirely. They'd turned combat into a science, an art form, a chess match where the pieces were techniques, strategies, and psychological warfare. It was terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The night before the exhibition, I found Marcus Webb alone in the training facility, shadow boxing against an invisible opponent. His movements were fluid, economical, almost hypnotic. Can I ask you something? I said, announcing my presence. He stopped, turned, nodded. Why do you do this? You're going up against beings who are physically superior in almost every measurable way. The odds are against you. The risk is substantial. What drives you to step into that ring? Marcus was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Then he smiled. You ever hear about the first humans who climbed the highest mountain on Earth? Place called Everest? I shook my head. It's almost 30,000 feet tall. The air is so thin you can barely breathe. The temperature drops to lethal levels. Avalanches. Crevasses. A dozen ways to die. People asked the first climbers why they wanted to go up there. You know what they said. What? Because it's there. He shrugged. Humans don't need logical reasons to test ourselves against impossible challenges. We just need the challenge to exist. Everything else sort of figures itself out. The day of the exhibition arrived with all the spectacle the Federation could manufacture. holographic displays, celebrity commentators. Enough pomp and ceremony to make a royal coronation look understated. I took my position at ringside, datapad ready, trying to maintain professional objectivity while my internal organs were doing gymnastics. The first fight was Marcus versus the Veltraxian Crusher, a being named Throk, who looked like someone had combined a boulder with a battering ram and given it a bad attitude. The betting odds heavily favored Throk. His species had won the Grappling Division championships for 6 consecutive years. He outweighed Marcus by 90 pounds. His skin was thick enough to resist most strikes. His legs could generate enough force to crack reinforced concrete. The fight started, and Throk immediately shot forward, attempting to grab Marcus and use his superior strength to crush him. Standard Veltraxian strategy, but Marcus wasn't there. He'd moved laterally, circling, staying light on his feet. Throk adjusted, shot again. Same result. This continued for about 90 seconds. Throk getting increasingly frustrated. Marcus staying calm, just out of reach. Then Throk made a mistake. He overcommitted on a takedown attempt, lunging too far, leaving himself slightly off balance. Marcus moved. Not away, toward. He caught Throk's extended arm, dropped his weight, and suddenly both fighters were on the ground. Throk tried to use his strength advantage to reverse position, but Marcus was already moving, flowing like water, his body positioning precise and controlled. Within 10 seconds, Marcus had Throk's arm hyperextended in what Captain Reeves had called an armbar. The Veltraxian struggled, trying to power out of it, but the leverage was wrong. His strength was working against him. The crowd heard the pop before they saw Throk tap out in submission. His elbow had dislocated. Fight 1. Human victory. Time, 2 minutes, 43 seconds. The arena went silent, then erupted. Half the crowd was cheering. The other half was screaming at the bookmakers, convinced the fight had been fixed. I knew better. I'd watched the footage. Marcus had systematically negated every advantage Throk possessed through superior technique and tactical awareness. Strength meant nothing if you couldn't apply it properly. Size didn't matter if your opponent controlled the position. Fight 2 featured Keiko versus the Scythian warrior, a female named Sora who moved like liquid death and had venom that could paralyze most species within seconds. This fight was faster. Sora was aggressive, using her reflexes and reach to keep Keiko at bay. But Keiko was patient. She absorbed strikes, took damage, kept her guard tight. Then, at the 90-second mark, Sora overextended on a spinning strike. Keiko exploded forward, closing the distance in a fraction of a second, and landed a perfectly timed punch directly to Sora's throat. The Scythian went down, gasping, her venom sacs useless if she couldn't breathe properly. The referee stopped the fight immediately. 2 for 2, the crowd was no longer just watching. They were riveted. This wasn't what anyone had expected. These weren't flukes or lucky shots. These were deliberate, calculated victories achieved through skill and preparation. Fight 3 was David versus the Kryn berserker Zakthor. This one was violent, brutal. Exactly the kind of stand-up war that should have favored the four-armed insectoid, but David was relentless. He controlled distance with his kicks, battered Zakthor's arms and legs with heavy strikes. And when the Kryn tried to close the distance, David would tie up 2 of his arms and deliver devastating knees to the body. Round 2, David caught Zakthor with an elbow strike that shattered one of his compound eyes. The Kryn couldn't continue. Fight stopped. 3 for 3. Lisa's fight against the Thorvian brawler was a defensive masterpiece. She made the massive warrior miss repeatedly, countering every wild swing with precise shots to the same targets. The Thorvian's frustration grew. His technique deteriorated. Lisa stayed calm, stayed patient, and in round 4 caught him with a perfect counter right hand that dropped him like a failed construction project. 4 for 4. By the time Jackson Cole stepped into the ring for the main event, the entire arena was on edge. 4 impossible victories. Could they make it 5? Rax the Annihilator stood across the ring, 7.5 feet of scaled muscle and predatory confidence. His record spoke for itself. His reputation was built on broken opponents and shattered dreams. Jackson looked tiny in comparison, but his expression was calm, focused, red. The fight began, and Rax came forward like an avalanche, claws extended, fangs bared, a terrifying display of natural weaponry and killing intent. Jackson didn't retreat. He moved at angles, staying just outside Rax's optimal range, making the Draconin work for every inch of the ring. And every time Rax committed to an attack, Jackson would counter, not with power, with precision. Jabs to the eyes, Low kicks to the knees, body shots to the floating ribs. Each strike targeted a vulnerable point, a weak spot in Rax's otherwise formidable defenses. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Jackson Cole systematically dismantled a warrior who'd been considered invincible. It took 3 rounds of calculated violence, tactical superiority, and absolute refusal to be intimidated. When Rax finally fell, his legs cut out from under him by accumulated damage to his joints, the referee stopped the fight. Technical knockout, 5 for 5, perfect record. The aftermath was chaos. News feeds across the galaxy exploded. Analysis paralysis set in as experts tried to explain how 5 humans had defeated 5 supposedly superior opponents. Betting houses implemented emergency protocols. 3 major fight promoters announced new human-inclusive divisions within their organizations. I filed my report sitting in my hotel room at 3 in the morning, still processing what I'd witnessed. The conclusion was inescapable. Humans had changed combat sports forever. Not because they were stronger or faster or more naturally gifted, but because they'd approached fighting as a problem to be solved, rather than a contest of natural superiority. They studied, they trained, they analyzed weaknesses and developed strategies. They turned every disadvantage into a puzzle piece that could be rearranged into victory. 2 months later, I attended the first official Human Combat Invitational, 32 fighters from Earth, competing in a tournament that would determine their rankings in the Federation's official combat leagues. The venue was packed. Beings from across the galaxy no longer dismissing humans as weak novelties but recognizing them as legitimate threats. I spotted Maya in the crowd, no longer competing but working as a coach for newer human fighters. She saw me, waved, made her way over. Quite a change from a few months ago, I said. She laughed. You're telling me I went from nobody to having to turn down sponsorship deals because I can't physically wear that many company logos. Do you think this will last? The human success in combat sports. She considered the question seriously. Honestly, I think we're just getting started. Every human fighter brings something different. Different styles, different experiences, different approaches. The galaxy is about to learn that humanity's real strength isn't any one thing. It's our diversity, our ability to adapt, our refusal to accept that anything is impossible just because it's difficult. I watched the tournament matches that day with new appreciation. Humans losing to superior opponents and learning from those losses. Humans winning against impossible odds and staying humble. Humans pushing boundaries and redefining what combat could be. Threx found me after the final match. He looked tired, defeated. I've spent 20 years analyzing combat sports, he said quietly. Thought I understood the fundamentals. Thought physical advantages were everything. And now I realize I've been watching fights. The humans are playing a completely different game. He paused. I'm enrolling in a human fighting academy next month. If I can't beat them, might as well learn from them. I smiled at that. The galaxy was changing, adapting, learn, all because a young woman named Maya Torres had stepped into a ring, faced an impossible opponent, and refused to accept that her species was inferior. She'd tapped her way to victory. One patient strike at a time, and in doing so had cracked the galaxy's certainty about natural hierarchies and predetermined outcomes. The universe, it turned out, didn't care about your advantages. It cared about what you did with your disadvantages. And humans, those stubborn, creative, absolutely insane mammals from a little blue planet, had turned their weaknesses into weapons. That was the day I stopped being just an analyst. That was the day I became a believer. Because, if humans could do this in combat sports, what else could they do? What other impossible challenges would they face with that same mixture of intelligence, determination, and complete disregard for common sense? I didn't know the answer. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. The galaxy was about to find out, and it was going to be spectacular.